On this edition of Stay Relevant, we're on the inside with former Discovery and Travel Channel development executive Doug Bailey. Doug chats with us about pitching your ideas to a network from the network's point of view, how a sizzle reel is almost mandatory when making a pitch, and who exactly you should try and get in front of with your great idea.
A lot of people in this business think you need to pitch the president or the SVP.
Hang on, because here it comes.
It's one small step for man. Everything is go here.
Welcome to Stay Relevant, my wandering conversations with interesting people. I'm Mike Sobola.
Neil, this is Houston. We're copying. The Eagle has landed.
As Director of Program Development and Program Development Manager for Discovery Networks, and most recently Director of Production and Development for Travel Channel, my next guest has had his hand in thousands of hours of programming over the past decade. A big welcome to Doug Bailey. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kind of been with the big networks, Discovery and Travel, which was part of Discovery at one point, forever. When I met you, you were, I guess, in development at the Emerging Networks Science Channel at that point.
Right. Back when we called those the digital networks, which is its own whole different thing these days.
So how'd you get into that?
I'm from the DC area, so I fell in love with Discovery Channel early on in cable TV, and I had the opportunity to intern there in college, and absolutely just fell in love with John Henrik's vision and what they were trying to do. And I fought and clawed my way into a full-time job there after working in local news in South Carolina and C-SPAN here and some other places. Ended up going full-time at the Discovery Digital Networks.
So you interned and then you actually left and
did
other stuff.
Yeah, I did other stuff, production and public affairs, and did some contract work at Discovery there in the interim when they were launching the daytime divisions for Discovery and TLC back in the day of Baby Story and Christopher Lowell and Wedding Story, back when they had a distinct daytime strategy. I helped launch some of those shows.
So you've been there and worked in kind of on the ground, coming up with ideas and developing these shows forever. And by the way, everybody I mentioned to that I was going to be talking to you today that knew you or was going to work with you were like, Doug's a great guy. I don't know anybody who says anything bad about you. It's amazing. It's amazing. So you have a good reputation.
I've worked hard on that reputation. That's what gets you the next job in this business.
Well, I mean, a lot of development executives and network executives are, I don't know, they're busy. There are a lot of people want their attention, so they kind of get a little edgy. And that comes across wrong, I guess, sometimes. But somehow you've managed to avoid that. You've been involved in like hundreds of hours of programming, and if not more. Do you ever get like fatigued of that, or do you find it kind of invigorating?
I find it invigorating. I think the audience is obviously always changing. Brands are always changing to try and keep up with the audience. So, you get to the point where we call them MOPs, most often pitched ideas, where you do get a little tired of those. And I think if you'd pitched me one of those at Travel Channel, I might be a little edgier than I was years before that. But beyond that, you also get to see cool ideas that are going to make great TV shows somewhere. It may not be right for your brand at that time, but you get to see everything that's being pitched in this industry of ours, no matter where you are. So even if it's not an idea for travel, you see it and you get jazzed about television again. So there's a mix of, bad and good.
I know. I hear a lot of criticisms that the networks seem to work with the same companies over and over. And I can understand you want somebody who's familiar with the process. Isn't that
right?
A lot of it? But they also
that's
have
a lot of
good ideas?
And I think you also want to work with people that you want to work with.
That you can get along with.
Exactly. You're dealing with them for a year at a time on a series. day in and day out. So oftentimes it's just natural human nature to do that with people you know, rather than take the risk of, oh my gosh, this guy seems a little pushy now, what if we get into business with him, or things like that. There seems to be a bit of a philosophy change at the networks these days, where they are more willing to take a risk on somebody with a good idea, because the good ideas are fewer and far between. There's so many outlets that if you see an idea that's amazing, then you'll figure out a way to do it.
If somebody has a good idea and they seem to have it all together with their pitch and everything, what would you suggest to them?
In my mind, it's always been 50-50, the idea and can they execute on that idea. I think that's evolving a little bit where, with sizzle reels and the technology available to make a presentation so much cheaper than it used to be, you can get a sense these days whether they can actually execute on something.
Or if they know
obviously
what they're
telling
doing.
a 30-minute or 60-minute story is different from telling a 3-minute story, but yes, you can get a sense of if they know what they're doing. The risk is a little bit lower these days than if it was a piece of paper.
Right.
And you just don't know, and that's the way it was 10 years ago.
So you are seeing more sizzle reels come in. Are you encouraging that?
Yeah, it's almost exclusively sizzle reels at this point. Even if it's a mood reel that doesn't cost you anything other than some edit time, almost everything that sells at the network has a piece of tape attached to it.
Do you take
it might be as raw as a talent tape,
Sure.
but oftentimes it's 3 to 5 minutes of polished something.
What else are you looking for? I'm thinking you need to bring value to the table a little bit. You need access, first of all. I'm
Right.
thinking you can't just have an idea. Everybody has an idea, and you have to know where your show is going, whether it has legs. What are just some of the things that a network executive is looking for?
So much these days is talent based. I would say 80% of what we did at Travel Channel was talent based, and the other 20% was a genre or an area we knew would work, and we generally farm that out or say, we need find somebody to do it. So really bringing unique talent is a key part of pitching these days.
And how about access to a unique world?
Yeah, that too. I think the best place to soft pitch is in person or on the phone. Get that executive into a conversation and let them feel creative and talk it through.
That's it sounds really easy to do.
I know. Well, I go back to the earlier point where I'm a nice guy and I'll talk to most people.
So let's step back. How do you get access like that? I guess one way is to develop a relationship with a production company that has the access and work through them. That it seems like the most logical.
Yeah.
But what if you don't want to go that route? I know there's Reel Screen, which is expensive, but is that a possibility? There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people pitching. There's a lot of noise. Is it really realistic to say that it's a good place to talk to somebody or not?
I go back and forth on Reel Screen, honestly. I think, the one thing we haven't talked about is agents, and maybe we put a pin in that for a second while I tell you a positive story about Reel Screen. Travel Channel has a series called Booze Traveler, which is the only time in my life that I've seen a series get greenlit from Reel Screen's 30 Minutes With. And the producer of that series had shot an entire pilot on spec, which of course we don't recommend anyone ever do, but she had, with the talent Jack Maxwell, she grabbed 2 Travel Channel execs at the end of the 30 Minutes With, almost literally grabbed, threw headphones on them and made them watch on an iPad this 3-4 minute sizzle reel. And Jack was good, and it was interesting, and it was right in the sweet spot of what Travel Channel was looking for at the moment. And so we gave them some finishing money to finish the pilot, and through that process kind of realized that they weren't a big enough shop to handle a series, and so partnered them with one of our preferred producers, and it's going into production on series 3 now. So that's that's a win at Real Screen. Those are fewer and far between. But I think it really is building that relationship from someone at the network. And, I often encourage people, the portal, the portal at Discovery, when I was there, we always did look at it, and it was the coordinator's job to process it. And a good coordinator can sort through and did bring us ideas from the portal. I think a lot of people in this business think you need to pitch the president or the SVP, where in reality, anyone on the development team is actually bringing ideas and is as empowered in most places that I've worked to bring ideas forward as anybody else. So if you can't build a relationship with the director, build a relationship with the coordinator or the manager. Good ones are trying to sell an idea. That's why they got into TV. So they'll work with people, anybody who has a good idea. So I wouldn't be title cognizant. I would get your idea in and build a relationship with anybody on the team that you can.
They're looking for content.
Right,
thinking.
exactly.
They may team you up with somebody.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway with the series we did together, Technology, was that afterwards I was actually getting all these offers from companies that knew I had gone through the Discovery fire in the process. Because we did have one good series. I was well familiar with the process.
Right.
And it is a very distinct process, and I can understand, having gone through that, totally understand why they look for this, because it is. Every network is unique.
And there's a lot of logistics to series television, no matter where you are, that are different than doing a one-off or a two-off.
Discovery networks are mainly, they were founded here in the D.C. area. They're mainly here. You've got offices in L.A. and New York and stuff. But does it matter where the production company is? Are most of the productions on the networks that are based here, do they come out of production companies from here? Do you find that to be the case, or does it not?
It's a mix. I mean, certainly the production companies that are based here have strong relationships with the people that are here just because we're here.
Right.
But there's also a lot going on in New York and LA these days. With reality becoming a big part of the nonfiction business. A lot of the Discovery networks have moved a lot of their key creatives to New York and LA. There's a snobbery, if you will.
I'm just saying, why is that really? Yeah.
I think I just think it's the whole idea of a talent pool is deeper in New York and LA.
And actually, that's something that I maintain for actors. I'm thinking, if you're a good actor, you're not staying in D.C. They're like, a couple of people doing all the work. You're going to L.A. or you're going to New York.
Right.
And I spent time in New York as a producer, and I can understand why you'd want to be there. But there's some real creative people here.
There is, and I think, this town grew up on the backs of Discovery and National Geographic and PBS, so there's a deep well of nonfiction documentary talent here.
Sure.
And I'm a little frustrated that as the networks go back towards that a little bit, as they look to rebuild their brands, that there is still this snobbery. But I think that's because a lot of the executives of those companies are New York based or LA based at this point.
So if somebody, give me some tips for our listeners. If an independent producer is listening, or even a production company, they want to pitch something, they have a bunch of ideas, and what would you suggest?
I would suggest trying to get an in-person meeting. I always tell people to save their money on Real Screen and spend it coming to the networks in a less busy time. Because for the same amount of money, you could go to New York, LA, and DC, and now Knoxville for in-person meetings when a network executive might give you an hour or let you take them to lunch rather than 30 minutes back-to-back when there's 500 ideas floating around our business. So that's the first step, is try to build a relationship with someone at the network. It is a business of relationships. Beyond that, do your homework, find out what is on their channel, have watched them. Everybody's trying to go after a different slice of the pie. There are a few networks that overlap in terms of ideas, but you can't just barge in and say, here's my slate of 7 ideas. That's the easiest way to get somebody to tune out. Barge in and say, here's the idea I think is great for Travel Channel. And then talk through it, and if they say no, then say, well, I've got a couple other ideas that may not be quite right for you, but execs always like to hear what your other ideas
So
are.
that's a good point. Don't just have one idea.
Don't just have one idea either.
I mean, I'm thinking it's a game of numbers to some extent, too.
It is.
How would you up your chances of getting, I guess, just getting heard? You're saying build a relationship. You're saying do your homework, which we shouldn't have to mention that. You should know
but
who
you
your
wouldn't
customer
believe,
is.
At least once a month, somebody barges in with 6 ideas that either are on Travel Channel at the moment or would never be on Travel Channel.
Or were on Travel Channel 20 years ago.
Right. If you have an amazing talent, then I'll be like, wow, that guy's good. Let's figure out what to do with him. I would bring 2 or 3 ideas,
with the talent,
even if they're generic, just to start the conversation. I wouldn't come in and say, here's a guy, I have no idea what to do with him, because that doesn't make you look good.
Right.
But even if they're...
You're saying networks are open to that
Oh,
kind of
these
pitch.
days, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's so talent-based.
Do you have a favorite show or series that you worked on or that you were associated with that you can think of for some reason or the other?
There's so many. I think Time Warp at Discovery Channel was sort of that moment in time where camera technology was so amazing and it was just jaw-dropping. I love Time Warp. And at Travel Channel, one's called Planet Primetime. A woman goes to a country and explores the country through its TV shows. So she gets to appear on 5 or 6 TV shows, whether they're reality or drama or news or fake news, and sort of get to see a country through its crazy TV shows. And that was a really cool show and got some interesting cultural context.
So reality television, there was the Honey Boo Boo side, the trashy side, and there's the the more kind of what it's evolving to, the more upstanding, unscripted reality, and it seems like we're headed more towards that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the trashy reality moment seems to have passed. Audiences got tired of it. I think a lot of what I see being commissioned these days is what I describe as a bit old school. It doesn't mean it has to be old school in terms of its production values, but going back to infotainment, whether that's more documentary or more formatted or more reality even, there's a lot of follow docs that have reality moments but are not trashy. Some of the flippers on HGTV, for instance, or the car build shows on Discovery. They're a bit more reality, but not in the trashy way of years past.
A format with reality.
Right.
Portions.
Right. Some of what I see these days being touted as brand feels very old school to me in terms of its execution too. I don't understand why, if we're going to tackle some old school subjects or more documentary subjects, we can't do it in a more modern, entertaining way. But there seems to be a lot of brands trying to figure themselves out at the moment. The model of cable TV was built on repeats, build a library and repeat the heck out of it. Right. And when that started falling apart, when repeats stopped working because there's so much content, people would just tune into the premieres, the underpinnings of the business started to falter. And I think that's still happening now, and brands are trying to figure out what to do to maintain and grow an audience with all these headwinds. And so it's going to be an interesting 5 to 10 years in cable television. I'm not a doomsdayer where I think it's going to go away in the next couple of years. I think it's going to consolidate. There's probably going to be fewer channels, and a focus on brands so that viewers really know what they're getting when they come to your channel. I mean, that's where Scripps has been so successful with HGTV and Food Network, is they've really built brands where you turn it on, you know what you're going to get. You may not know the show, but you know that you like that content. And that's the goal for Travel Channel over the next few years, is really to turn Travel Channel into that brand, much like HGTV and Food. And I think Scripps is smart in that way. Then if the distribution model changes, they've got brands that they can monetize on digital or VOD or over the top. However you're consuming it, you know you want your HGTV. And I think that's why other brands are trying to rebuild themselves.
Some of the takeaways in terms of what people can expect, talent's very good. You got a talent, come up with some ideas, even if they're not totally fleshed out.
Right,
and go to your executive, who you've hopefully built a relationship with, and pitch them.
Yeah.
Have more than one idea. Make sure you do your homework. You know what fits with each network, because you can't say, I think I can see this on Discovery and Nat Geo and Food and probably History, and MTV and True TV too, because I like that.
Right,
They fit on all
right,
those. It's perfect for
right,
everybody.
Right. That's not true.
That's
that can't be possible. And I think, a lot of producers I've known over the years get very hung up on the fact that networks are changing their mandates all the time. That's true, and that's going to happen. But if you know what the schedule is right now, you've done as much homework as you probably can, unless you have an agent or an inside source or whatever. So at least show you've done that homework.
Right.
Don't be pitching me what travel was doing 3 years ago, because that's when my eyes start to glaze over. Brands don't shift that dramatically very often. True did a year or two ago, but it shifts. The audience stays the same. You're either going for men, you're going for women, you're going for both, you're going for young, you're going for old, you're going for families, you're going for upper income or lower income. That's going to stay consistent. Don't get so hung up on, well, they were looking for car shows and now they're not looking for car shows. Why would I pitch a car show? Most execs aren't going to hold you to task for that.
So you should look at demographics mainly. Who
are they trying to talk to?
Right. And we find that out by watching.
Right.
And if you can't figure it out, then you shouldn't be pitching.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's some great advice from a great guy, Doug. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. I appreciate it. Been a pleasure.
Sure. Good to see you again.
My guest today has been Doug Bailey, former Director of Program Development at Discovery, and most recently Director of Development and Production for Travel Channel. Thanks again, Doug.
Thank you.
The podcast is Stay Relevant, wandering conversations with interesting people. Original music by Popmark Media, on the web at popmarkmedia.com. For more excellent information on how to sell your show to the networks, check out producingunscripted.com. It's full of valuable information from Hollywood insiders Joke and Biagio, and it's free. Producingunscripted.com. Until next time, try and stay relevant.